What up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is the 4th of July, 2025. It's about 7:24 p.m. where I'm at right now, and we are starting our 13th book in our Book to React series, Black Bolshevik, Autobiography of an Afro-American Communist, the autobiography of Harry Haywood. Now, the story of me and this book go back a while. I found out about this book many years ago. I would say about 15 years ago. And it was definitely something that I wanted to read, but I was intimidated to pick it up because the book is about 700 pages long. It's thick. It's thick. It's thick like we wish Zendaya was. You feel me? So I always thought I was going to read this book. I just never knew when. And it's summer reading time. We finished another book earlier this year. We finished quite a few books this year, and we're going to continue reading on this series, and I'm looking forward to peeling back the layers of this man's life and want to know more about him. Jumping into the comments, Kamal says, happy post-Juneteenth. I know I should have went live on Juneteenth, but we're going live on July 4th to remember our ancestors and to remember that this holiday is about freedom and liberation for all. And that's the point of what we are doing today. So let's get into it. I don't want to waste any time. I'm not going to beat around the bush. You see the title of the book. You can get the book on Amazon for the humble price of only 46 pence. 46 pence in paperback, and close to $650, close to $650 hardcover. This is a very rare book to find. It was published on January 1st, 1978. Very rare book to find, though you can find it on this website, libcom.org, for free. And because this is a book by a socialist writer, of course it's going to be given out for free, and you should pick it up. So I'm just going to briefly do an autobiography, some background on Harry Haywood, who he is, and then we're going to start peeling back the layers of this book by jumping into the first chapter. Here is Harry Haywood, the man right here. He was born February 4th, 1898 in South Omaha, Nebraska, and died January 4th, 1985 at the age of 86. Harry Haywood was an American political activist who was a leading figure in both the Communist Party of the United States and the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. His goal was to connect the political philosophy of the Communist Party with the issues of race. In 1926, he joined other African-American communists and traveled to the Soviet Union to study the effect of communism on racial issues found in the United States. His work there resulted in his selection to be the head of the Communist Party's Negro Department. The party platform changed by the late 1930s and began to stray away from advocating for African-American self-determination. As the party's platform changed over time, Haywood lost his stance within the party. His work also included creating a group to help the Scottsboro Boys case. So I believe Harry Haywood was a true black nationalist in the sense that he believed black people should have their own nation within the United States or elsewhere, which is an interesting take to have. Haywood was also an author. His first book was Negro Liberation, published in 1948. After he was expelled from his affiliating party, he wrote an autobiography called Black Bolshevik, which was also published in 1978. He contributed major theory to Marxist thinking on the national question of African Americans in the United States. He was also a founder of the Maoist New Communist Movement. So this book seems like it was written after he was kicked out of the Soviet Union's Communist Party and went back to the U.S. and continued to advocate for true black nationalism, true black radicalism with the paradigm of communism as his guiding force. So we're going to be jumping into the book without further ado. Hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully you find this interesting, captivating. I am, because I've been waiting to read this book for a long time in my life. And if you have any other books that you think we should pick up, please let me know. Black Bolshevik, Autobiography of an Afro-American Communist by Harry Haywood. Liberator Press, Chicago, Illinois. Copyright 1978, but we don't respect copyright on this channel. I'm joking. He dedicated this book to my family, Gwen, Haywood Jr., and Becky. I believe his son is now a doctor now. Briefly, the acknowledgments. There have been many friends and comrades who have, directly or indirectly, helped me with the writing of this book. Unfortunately, there are too numerous to all be named here. There are a number of young people who have helped with the editorial, research, and typing tasks and helped the project along through political discussions. Special thanks to Ernie Allen, who gave yeoman help with the early chapters. Others whose assistance was indispensable include Jody and Susan Chandler, Paula Cohen, Callahan, Stu Doughty, and Janet Goldwasser, Paul Elitzik, Pat Fry, Gary Joff, Sherman Miller, John Schwartz, Lynn Wells, and Carl Davidson. Others who gave me assistance are Renee Blackhand and Nathalia Garcia. I wonder how many of those people are still alive. Anyway, over the past years, I have had discussions with several veteran comrades and friends who have helped immeasurably in jogging my memory and filling in the gaps where my own experience was lacking. I extend my warmest appreciation to Jesse Gray, Josh Lawrence, Arthur and Maud White Katz, John Killians, Ruth Hamlin, Francis Lohman, Al Murphy, Joan Sandler, Delia Page, and Jack and Ruth Shulman. Yeah, if I write my autobiography one day, which I hope to do, I hope to write a book one day, I do need somebody to help me jog my memory. I'm going to be asking Acty, did that really happen? Did I really slap that man? Did I really do it? I don't know. A political autobiography is necessarily shaped by experiences over the years and by comrades who helped influenced me in the long battle for self-determination and against revisionism. My earliest political depths are to the first core of black cadres in the CPUSA, Cyril Briggs, Edward Doty, Richard B. Moore, and to my brother, Otto Hall, all former members of the African Blood Brotherhood. Oh, that's a cold-ass name, African Blood Brotherhood. That's hard. That's hard. We need to bring that back. Anyway, to Harrison George, outstanding son of the working class, charter member of the CPUSA, former editor of the Daily Worker and the People's World, who gave his all to the communist movement and died alone, victimized for his premature anti-revisionism. A special tribute to my comrades in the battles against revisionism within the CPUSA and after. Al Lannon, veteran director of the Waterfront Section and member of the Central Committee of the CPUSA. Charles Lohman, executive secretary of the Brooklyn Party Organization. Isadora Began, executive secretary of the Bronx Party Organization. Alan and Pearl Laws, Al and Ruth Hamlin, Olga and Victor Augusto. And to my wife, Gwendolyn Midlow Hall, my closest collaborator from 53 through 64 in the writing of manuscripts as well as in the political battles, who has since established her own reputation as historian and essayist. Shout out to the beautiful black queen that we know Haywood married. The beautiful black queen. We know. Snow bunnies never, black queens forever. Anyway. A tribute to Ed Strong, former communist youth leader and director of the South Negro Youth Congress, whose premature death in the mid-50s cut short his uncompromising stand within the Central Committee for the right of self-determination for the black nation. To the editors of Soul Book magazine, who published my writings in 65 and 66 and invited me to Oakland, California in the spring of 66 during the formative stages of the Black Panther movement. Oh, this man about to be like, what's his name? Life is like a box of chocolates. Forrest Gump, he about to be everywhere. So to Vincent Harding, who provided me with funds to return to the U.S. from Mexico in 70 and gave me technical and material assistance to begin this autobiography. Thanks to John Henry Clark, shout out to John Henry Clark, and Francisco and Elizabeth Cotlet de Mora for their enthusiasm and moral support. To Robert Warner, director of the Michigan Historical Collections, for his help and his sensitivity to the needs to collect and preserve historically relevant materials from the black movement in the United States. And now to the contents. We're only going to be reading Chapter 1, A Child of Slaves. Let's jump on ahead. Black Bolshevik. The prologue. Well, you know what? Let's read the prologue too. We'll read the prologue, and we'll also read Chapter 1. I got time. Hope you got some time. Anyway, on July 28th, 1919, I literally stepped into a battle that was to last the rest of my life. Exactly 3 months after mustering out of the Army, I found myself in the midst of one of the bloodiest race riots in the U.S. history. It was certainly a most dramatic return to the realities of American democracy. Powerful opening paragraph. Powerful opening paragraph. You know it's about to be fire. It came to me then that I had been fighting the wrong war. The Germans weren't the enemy. The enemy was right here at home. These ideas had been developing ever since I landed home in April, and a lot of other black veterans were having the same thoughts. Ooh, ooh. I had a job as a waiter on the Michigan Central Railroad at the time. In July, I was working the Wolverine, the crack Michigan Central train between Chicago and New York. We would serve lunch and dinner on the run out of Chicago to St. Thomas, Canada, where the dining car was cut off the train. The next morning, our cars would be attached to the Chicago-bound train, and we would serve breakfast and lunch into Chicago. Don't you miss those good old days in America where you could just zip line across the country on trains? What happened to that infrastructure? What happened to to the infrastructure. And now it's just a car-centric nation. Sick. On July 27th, the Wolverine left on a regular run to St. Thomas, passing through Detroit. We heard news that a race riot had broken out in Chicago. The situation had been tense for some time. Several members of the crew, all of them black, had bought revolvers and ammunition the previous week when on a special to Battle Creek, Michigan. Thus, when we returned to Chicago at about 2 p.m. the next day, July 28th, we were apprehensive about what awaited us. Going to Sim Foslo 15, you are a great guy. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Sim Foslo. I appreciate that. Shout out to Sim Foslo for the compliments, but it's not about me. It's about my guy, Harry Haywood, today. We're reading his book, we're reading his story, and I want to give a shout out to Sim Foslo for showing love. Hopefully he sticks around to hear the story of this great man. Let's continue. The whole dining car crew, 6 waiters and 4 cooks, got off at the 12th Street station in Chicago. Usually we would stay on the car while it backed out to the yards, but the station seemed a better route now. We were all tense as we passed through the station on the way to the elevated, which would take us to the south side and home. I don't know if they mean elevator right there. Suddenly, a white trainman accosted us. "Hey, you guys going out to the south side?" "Yeah, so what?" I said, immediately on the alert, thinking he might start something. Imagine being in Chicago today and a white man tries to bully a black man about going to the south side. That's funny. Oh, how things change. "If I were you, I wouldn't go by the avenue." He meant Michigan Avenue, which was right in front of the station. "Why? There's a big race riot going on out there, and already this morning a couple of colored soldiers were killed coming in unsuspectingly. If I were you, I'd keep off the street and go right out those tracks by the lake." I hate that we call them race riots because they really weren't race riots. They were pogroms. They were white mob violence. I hate using the term race riot because that makes it seem like black people were acting up too. Black people, if they did kill any of those white boys in those race riots, it was out of self-defense. Anyway, we took the trainman's advice, thanked him, and turned toward the tracks. Going to the comments, Kamal says, Harry Haywood. Shout out to Harry Haywood. So we took the trainman's advice, thanked him, and turned toward the tracks. It would be much slower walking home, but if he were right, it would be safer. As we turned down the tracks toward the south side of the city, towards the black ghetto, I thought of what I had just been through in Europe and what now lay before me in America. On one side of us lay the summer warmness of Lake Michigan. On the other side was Chicago, a huge and still growing industrial center of the nation, bursting at its seams, brawling, sprawling Chicago, hog butcher for the nation, as Carl Sandburg had called it. As we walked, I remembered the war. On returning from Europe, I had felt good to be alive. I was glad to be back with my family, mom, pop, and my sister. At 21, my life lay before me. What should I do? The only trade I had learned was waiting tables. I hadn't even finished the 8th grade. Perhaps I should go back to France, live there, and become a French citizen. Why didn't you do it, Harry? Why didn't you do it? You should have stayed in France, man. Should have stayed in France. But it's crazy to think about our ancestors, who did such great things. Harry Haywoods of the world, and literally our grandfathers, great-grandfathers, they didn't have no education. They graduated from the 8th grade and changed the world, moved mountains. So that should give us all inspiration. Anyway, after all, I hadn't seen any Jim Crow there in France. But Harry, you should have stayed in France. Going to the comments, Sim Foslo says, can you show again the book? Absolutely. You can pick up this book on lib.com.org, Black Bolshevik, Autobiography of an Afro-American Communist. Very easy book to find for free, to pick it up and read for yourself if you want to. Just download it right here if you want to. And Kamal says, I never recognized race riots either. Yeah, it sounds ridiculous to say there was a race riot. You mean there was a mini genocide happening in a city, where all the white boys just got turned up because they saw a black man just look at a white woman? Continuing here. Had race prejudice in the U.S. lessened? I knew better. Conditions in the states had not changed, but we blacks had. We were determined not to take it anymore. But what was I walking into? Southside Chicago, the black ghetto, was like a besieged city. Whole sections of it were in ruins. Buildings burned and the air was heavy with smoke, reminiscent of the Holocaust from which I had recently returned. Our small band, huddled like a bunch of raw recruits under machine gun fire, turned up 26th Street and then into the heart of the ghetto. At 35th and Indiana, we split up to go our various ways. I headed for home at 42nd Place and Bowen. None of us returned to work until the riot was over more than a week later. That was a soldier. That's a soldier right there. He went out into the streets, with it. How many of us can say we would do that? How many of us say that we would, or that we could do that we would be brave enough to do that? To come back to our home country after fighting a war in Europe and then get faced with a racial attack from a mob of people in your own community and you outside patrolling, ready to get it rolling. You know what I'm saying? That takes a lot of guts and big nuts. All right. Sim Foslo says, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Shout out to Sim Foslo for showing love in the chat, man. But Sim Foslo, we're reading a book from an explicit communist. I would like to know how people feel about communism. I just want some honest opinions. What are your honest opinions about communism? And especially, what do you think communism could do or do against Black Americans? What could it do for or against the Black American struggle for liberation and freedom? I would like to know what the people think about communism. Well, let's continue here. So, the battle at home was just as real as the battle in France had been. As I recall, there was full-scale street fighting between black and white. Blacks were snatched from the streetcars and beaten or killed. Pitched battles were fought in ghetto streets. Hoodlums roamed the neighborhood, shooting at random. Blacks fought back. As I saw it at the time, Chicago was two cities. The one was the Chamber of Commerce's city of the American Miracle, the Chicago of the 1893 World Columbian Exposition. It was the new industrial city which had grown in 50 years from a frontier town to become the second largest city in the country. The other, the black community, had been part of Chicago almost from the time the city was founded. John Baptiste Point du Sable, a black trapper from French Canada, was the first settler. Later came fugitive slaves, and after the Civil War, more blacks fleeing from post-Reconstruction terror, taking jobs as domestics and personal servants. You know, Chicago has a very special place in the history of black folks. It contributed a lot to our music and our culture, jazz, hip-hop, soul, R&B. So many things have come from Chicago specifically, you know what I mean? And it's always been a chocolate city. Whether the whites want to gentrify it or not, Chicago will always be, at least historically, a chocolate city. Founded by a black man, many black refugees from the South fled there. Chicago will always be a chocolate city. Going now to the comments, Kamal says, that's right, my grandfather couldn't read, yet he fought in Korea and raised a dozen children with my grandmother. Shout out to Kamal. Your grandfather was a G, triple OG. Triple OG. Some of our ancestors couldn't read nor write. Couldn't even write their name on a piece of paper. Many of the people that were newly freed slaves had to just write their names as X on a piece of paper when they were signing away to get land or to say that who they were, etc., etc. You know what I mean? And still, they raised us, they brought us up. We should be proud of our ancestors, for real, for real, for real. Anyway, continuing here. The large increase was in the late 1880s through World War I, as industry in the city expanded and as blacks streamed north following the promise of jobs, housing, and an end to Jim Crow lynching. The Illinois Central tracks ran straight through the Deep South from Chicago to New Orleans, and the Panama Limited made the run every day. Those that took the train north didn't find a promised land. They found jobs and housing all right, but they had to compete with the thousands of recent immigrants from Europe who were also drawn to the jobs in the packing houses, stockyards, and steel mills. The promise of an end to Jim Crow was nowhere fulfilled. In those days, the beaches on Lake Michigan were segregated. Most were reserved for whites only. The 26th Street beach close to the black community was open to blacks, but only as long as they stayed on their own side. Anybody here been to Chicago? I've only been to Chicago maybe one time. I think maybe I went twice. I can't remember. It was when I was very young for a family reunion. Never got to see Lake Michigan, like the beach side and stuff like that. I know there's a lot of coast on all of the Great Lakes in the north of our beautiful country. But yeah, very interesting. I would like to see what the 26th beach looks like today. And if you've been to Chicago, if you've been to the Midwest, if you swam in the lakes of the Great Lakes of the North, let us know what it was like. Anyway. So the riot had started at this beach, which was then jammed with a late July crowd. Eugene Williams, a 17-year-old black youth, was killed while swimming off the white side of the beach. The black community was immediately alive with accounts of what had happened, that he had been murdered while swimming, that a group of whites had thrown rocks at him and killed him, and that the policemen on duty at the beach had refused to make any arrests. This incident was the spark that ignited the flames of racial animosity which had been smoldering for months. Fighting between blacks and whites broke out on the 26th Street beach after Williams's death. It soon spread beyond the beach and lasted over 6 days. Before it was over, 38 people, black and white, were dead, 537 injured, and over 1,000 homeless. Wow, over one person getting killed. You get what I mean? The whites couldn't control their anger. They couldn't control their rage. They turned red in the face, killed a boy while he was swimming, and then we have 1,000 people homeless, of course. The memory of this mass rebellion is still very sharp in my mind. It was the great turning point in my life, and I have dedicated myself to the struggle against capitalism ever since. In the following pages of my autobiography, I have attempted to trace the development of that struggle in the hopes that today's youth can learn from both our successes and failures. It is for the youth and the bright future of a socialist USA that this book has been written. Powerful prologue. Sick prologue, very deep. I like his writing style. It's direct, it's to the point. It's not overly flowery. You know what I mean? This is a man, you know what I'm saying? Like Malcolm X always said, make it plain. And the good thing about our ancestors, a little bit, you know, once they became literate, they just made it plain. You know what I'm saying? They didn't try to overtalk us. They didn't try to, you know, use a bunch of flowery words. You know what I'm saying? They just said it straight and made it direct. And that's what I like about his writing style. So this is probably going to be a very easy book to read, very fun book to read, very engaging. Hope you stay tuned because we're gonna have a lot of fun with this. Let's go here. Chapter 1, A Child of Slaves. I was born in South Omaha, Nebraska on February 4th, 1898. Whew! 1898, my God, just imagine. I just feel like everything went sepia tone. It's hot as hell. A man with like a straw in his mouth and a straw hat is like sitting on a front porch in a rocking chair with a shotgun in his lap. You know what I'm saying? I'm just visualizing the scene. I was born in South Omaha, Nebraska on February 4th, 1898. The youngest of 3 children of Harriet and Haywood Hall. They only had 3 kids. That was few back then. That was like having 1 today. Otto, my older brother, was born in May 1891, and Eppa, my sister, in December 1896. Where them names come from? Eppa? Boy, our ancestors had some wild names. Kamal says, I've been all over Chicago and concur the historical enrichment you highlighted. Shout out to Kamal. Kamal also says he grew up in the 1910s, Nat Turner territory, said he would never return. Woo! Kamal out here spitting in the comments section. The 1890s had been a decade of far-reaching structural change in the economic and political life of the United States. These were fateful years in which the pattern of 20th century subjugation of blacks was set. A young U.S. imperialism was ready in 1898 to shoulder its share of the white man's burden and take its manifest destiny beyond the Pacific coast and the Gulf of Mexico. In the war against Spain, it embarked on its first civilizing mission against the colored people of the Philippines and the mixed breeds of Cuba and Puerto Rico. In the course of the decade and a half following the Spanish-American War, the two-faced banner of racism and imperialist benevolence was carried to the majority of the Caribbean countries and the whole of Latin America. The echo of this industrial imperialism in America, said W.E.B. Du Bois, was the expulsion of black men from American democracy, their subjugation to caste control and wage slavery. In 1877, the Hayes-Tilden Agreement had successfully aborted the ongoing democratic revolution of Reconstruction in the South. Blacks were sold down the river as northern capitalists, with the assistance of some former slaveholders, gained full economic and political control of the South. Henceforward, it was assured that the future development of the region will be carried out in complete harmony with the interests of Wall Street. The following years saw the defeat of the Southern-based agrarian populist movement with its promise of black and white unity against the power of monopoly capital. The counter-revolution against Reconstruction was in full swing. I love, this is the reason why I became a communist, is because the way the communists break down the history of the United States is so thorough and so deep, because and a lot of the times when people break down the history of the U.S., they only focus on the cultural stuff or the historic moments, like the major wars, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, et cetera, or they talk about the trends of the culture, et cetera, but they never talk about the economics, right? And also the deeply entrenched racism in the U.S. culture that allows certain moves to be made. So the counter-revolution against Reconstruction was not only cultural, it was not only a backlash to black progress from racist whites, it was also an economic warfare against the poor whites of the South who wanted to, gain the benefits now that the aristocratic slaveholding class had been defeated. And it was also, class warfare against these newly enslaved people, these newly freed people who were formerly enslaved, now wanting to have full economic rights. So there's a lot to carry. There's a lot that is very dope about the communist analysis of American history. But beginning here. So, beginning in 1890, the Southern state legislature enacted a series of disenfranchisement laws. Within the next 16 years, these laws were destined to completely abrogate the rights of blacks to vote. The same period saw the revival of the notorious Black Codes, the resurgence of the hooded terror of the Ku Klux Klan, and the defeat for re-election in 1905 of the last black congressman surviving the Reconstruction period. Jim Crow laws enforcing segregation in public facilities were enacted by Southern states and municipal governments. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld Jim Crow in the Plessy v. Ferguson decision in 1896, declaring that the legislation is powerless to eradicate racial instincts and establishing the principle of separate but equal. This decision was only reversed in 1954 when the U.S. Supreme Court held that separate facilities were inherently unequal. At the time when I was born, the black experience was mainly a Southern one. The overwhelming majority of black people still resided in the South. Most of the black inhabitants of the South Omaha region were refugees from the 20-year terror of the post-Reconstruction period. Omaha itself, despite its Midwestern location, did not escape the terror completely, as indicated by the lynching of a black man, Joe Coe, by a mob in 1891. Many people had relatives and families in the South. Some had trekked up to Kansas in 1879 under the leadership of Henry Adams of Louisiana and Moses Pap Singleton of Tennessee. And many had then continued further north to Omaha and Chicago. Didn't know about those people. They sound dope. Didn't know about Henry Adams of Louisiana leading his people like Moses out of the hellhole of Louisiana and Moses Pap out of Tennessee. Didn't hear about them, but this is why we read this new information. So, continuing here, my parents were born slaves in 1860. They were 3 years old at the time of the Emancipation Proclamation. My father was born on a plantation in Martin County, Tennessee, north of Memphis. The plantation was owned by Colonel Haywood Hall, whom my father remembered as a kind and benevolent man. When the slaves, but by the way, I just have to say this, his father was only like 3 years old. So I don't know how his father could really know that the slave master was a nice man. I can't understand that. Anyway, when the slaves were emancipated in 1863, my grandfather, with the consent of Mr. Hall, took both the given name and surname of his former master. Very interesting. See, the thing is, I thought that we had our last names like Hill or Haywood because when the North came down and they freed the slaves, they just said, "What's your name?" And the guy said, "My name is Joe." And then they would say, "Okay, you're Joe from the Hill plantation, so we're going to call you Joe Hill," or something like that. But how Harry Haywood is saying it, his grandfather, who lived most of his life as a slave, asked the former slave master if he could take his name, Hall, or something like that. So, interesting. I didn't know that. Very, very interesting for me. So I never knew Grandfather Hall, as he died before I was born. According to my father and uncle, he was, as they said in those days, much of a man. He was active in local Reconstruction politics and probably belonged to the black militia. Although Tennessee did not have a Reconstruction government, there were many whites who supported the democratic aims that were pursued during the Reconstruction period. But Tennessee was also the home of the KKK, where it was first organized after the Civil War. In the terror that followed the Hayes-Tilden Agreement, these night riders had marked my grandfather out as a bad N-word. I can't say the N-word on YouTube because even though I'm black, they're going to demonetize me. So they marked out his grandfather as a bad N-word for lynching. At first, they were deterred because of the paternalism of Colonel Hall. Many of Hall's former slaves still lived on his plantation after the war ended, and the colonel had let it be known that he would kill the first son of a bitch that trespassed on his property and tried to terrorize his negroes. Okay. But the anger of the night riders, strengthened by corn liquor, finally overcame their fear of Colonel Hall. My father, who was about 15 at the time, described what happened. One night, the Klansmen rode onto the plantation and headed straight for grandfather's cabin. They broke open the door, and one poked his head into the darkened cabin. "Hey, Hall's N-word, where are you?" My grandfather was standing inside and fired his shotgun point blank at the hooded head. The Klansman, half his head blown off, toppled onto the floor of the cabin. That's hard. That sounds like the ending of Sinners. That's hard. Anyway, the Klansman, half his head blown off, toppled onto the floor of the cabin, and his companions mounted their horses and fled. Grandmother, then pregnant, fell against the iron bed. Interesting. Grandfather got the family out of the cabin and they ran to the big house for protection. It was obvious they couldn't stay in Tennessee, so the colonel hitched up a wagon and personally drove them to safety outside of Martin County. Okay, now I get why his father said that the slave master was a good man, because his grandfather killed a white man who was with the Ku Klux Klan, and the former slave master helped save his slave, which was Harry Haywood's grandfather, by taking them out of the county, which is dope. That's an interesting story. See, slavery was more complex. It was more complex than people make it out to be. Of course, it was vicious, it was brutal, it was nasty, and it never should have happened. But it was very complex because we were still dealing with people in close proximity to other people, right? And just like how we read in the book, Black Men, White Women, Illicit Sex in the 19th Century South, it was more complex than just saying black men and white women could not have sex. Of course, they did have sex. You know what I mean? And in this case, this former slave master helped save a black man's life for killing a white man, which is interesting. Anyway, some of grandfather's family were already living in Des Moines, Iowa, so the Hall family left by train for Des Moines the following morning. The shock of this experience was so great that grandmother gave birth prematurely to their third child, my Uncle George, who lived to be 95. Grandmother, however, became a chronic invalid and died a few years after the flight from Tennessee. Father was only in his teens when the family left for Des Moines, so he spent most of his youth there. In the late 1880s, he left and moved to South Omaha, where there was more of a chance to get work. He got a job at Cudahy's Packing Company, where he worked for more than 20 years, first as a beef lugger, loading sides of beef on refrigerated freight cars, and then as a janitor in the main office building. Not long after his arrival, he met and married Mother, Harriet Thorpe, who had come up from Kansas City, Missouri, at about the same time. Father was powerfully built, of medium height, but with tremendous breadth. He had a 46-inch chest and weighed over 200 pounds. That was a man. That was a man, baby. He was an extremely intelligent man. With little or no formal schooling, he had taught himself to read and write and was a prodigious reader. Unfortunately, despite his great strength, he was not much of a fighter, or so it seemed. In later years, some of the old slave psychology and fear remained. He was an ardent admirer of Booker T. Washington, who, in his Atlanta Compromise speech of 1895, had called on blacks to submit to the racist status quo. Booker T. Washington, boo! No, we're not going to boo Booker T. Washington, but he was complex. Uncle George was the opposite. He would brook no insult and had been known to clean out a whole bar room when offended. The middle brother, Watt, was also a fighter and was especially dangerous if he had a knife or had been drinking. I remember both of them complaining of my father's timidity. My mother's family also had a great fighting spirit. Her father, Jerry Thorpe, was born on a plantation near Bowling Green, Kentucky. He was illiterate, but very smart and very strong. Even as an old man, his appearance made us believe the stories that were told of his strength as a young man. When he was feeling fine and happy, his exuberance would get the best of him, and he'd grab the largest man around, hoist him on his shoulders, and run around the yard with him. That's funny. How you pick up another man and just run in the yard with him like he's your bitch on wedding? Oh, man. Anyway, Grandfather Thorpe was half Creek Indian and had an Indian profile with a humped nose and high cheekbones. Okay, that I hate when we say that. Come on now. Grandmama got raped. Grandmama got raped. Let's stop playing. Talk about he was half Creek Indian. Anyway. Grandfather Thorpe was half Creek Indian and had an Indian profile with a humped nose and high cheekbones. His hair was short and curly, and he had a light brown complexion. That was a light-skinned baddie. Anyway. He had a straggly white beard, and he tried to cultivate it into a Van Dyke. He said his father was a Creek Indian and his mother was a black plantation slave. No one knew his exact age, but we made a guess based on a story he often told us. He was about 6 or 7 years old when he said, "The stars fell." When was that, Grandpa? Oh, one night the stars fell. I remember it very clearly. The skies were all lit up by falling stars. People were scared almost out of their wits. The old master and mistress and all the slaves were running out on the road, falling down on their knees to pray and ask forgiveness. We thought the judgment day had surely come. Glory, hallelujah. It was the last fire. The next day, the ground all covered with ashes. At first we thought all of that was just his imagination, something he had fantasized as a child, and then remembered as a real event. But when my older brother Otto was in high school, he got interested in astronomy and came across a reference to a meteor shower in 1833. We figured out that was what Grandfather Thorpe had been talking about, so we concluded that he was born around 1825 or 1826. Interesting. It's interesting how our elders didn't know their birthdays. In fact, there's a lot of people in the world right now who don't know their exact birthdays. Going now here, Kamal says, Cornel West, when asked about Booker T. Washington, he said, "I still love that Negro." That's hilarious. That's hilarious. We still love that Negro. Yes, we do. He's one of us. He's one of us. Nelson Moreno says, "Hey, Simon." Shout out to Nelson Moreno. What you up to, you nasty boy, you? Anyway, continuing here. Grandfather Thorpe was filled with stories, many about slavery. Chillin', "I've got scars I'll carry to my grave." He would show us the welts on his back from slave beatings. My grandmother also had them. Most of his beatings came from his first master in Kentucky, but he was later sold to a man in Missouri, whom he said treated him much better. This may have been due in part to his value as a slave. He was skilled both as a carpenter and cabinet maker. Grandfather had many stories to tell about the Civil War. He was in Missouri at the same time, living in an area that was first taken by a group known as Quantrell's Raiders, a guerrilla-like band of irregulars who fought for the South, and then by the Union forces. Quantrell is such a cool name, and that's such a black name. I'm going to name my son Quantrell. There we go. Quantrell's Raiders. That's hard. That's hard. Quantrell. I'm going to change my last name to Jackson. I'm going to name my son Quantrell Jackson. Anyway. Kamal says, "We ride with W.E.B. Du Bois on this channel. Ain't that right? We ride with W.E.B. Du Bois. He does no wrong. W.E.B. Du Bois does no wrong on this channel." Nelson Moreno says, "Diddy liked that I was such a hard supporter for him, so he invited me to a freak-off party with Young Miami." Smack up Young Miami. Young Miami got a lot of ass. Young Miami got a lot of ass, Nelson. Take care of that. Handle that. Pee in her mouth. Pee in her mouth. Not her mouth, her mouth. Nelson Moreno says, "This isn't the right time, but can I send you a video of self-black emancipation in the Civil War era?" You can send that video. I'm not sure if we'll be able to watch it on stream. I should open up the chat so I can watch stuff on stream. Next time, I promise I will. I always say next time, and then I never do it. But anyway, when the Union soldiers first came into the plantations, they would call in slaves from the fields and make them sit down in the great drawing room of the house. They would then force the master and the mistress and their family to cook and serve for the slaves. That's hard. That's hard. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. A lot of things happen in war that we never knew about. Grandfather told us that the soldiers would never eat any of the food that was served because they were afraid of getting poisoned. Oh, okay. So they would make the slave masters make food for the slaves, but really just to test if the slave masters were going to poison people. Interesting. The master of the plantation was generally decent when it became clear that the Union forces were going to control the area for a while. At that time, Grandfather and my grandmother, Ann, lived on adjacent plantations somewhere near Moberly, Missouri. Grandfather was allowed to visit Ann on weekends. Often on Sundays, when he went to make a visit, he was challenged by Union guards. They would roughly demand to know his mission. My grandfather and grandmother got married with the agreement of their two masters and eventually had a family of 5 daughters and 2 sons. Grandfather Thorpe was given a plot of land in return for his services as a carpenter, but the family soon moved into Moberly. As the children reached working age, the family began to break up, but the girls always remained very close. They came back to visit frequently and never broke family ties as the boys had. Going now to the comments. All right. I'm going to click this video. Let's see if I can watch this video on my phone right here. Okay. So the Civil War was a slave revolt. Okay. And this came out an hour ago. I watched this channel, Aton Shea Films. I've seen Aton Shea Films before, and shout out to him. Because that's a guy, I believe he's from Louisiana, a white guy, but he's actually not racist, which is very hard to do if you're white growing up in Louisiana. So yeah, shout out to Nelson Moreno for putting me back on Aton Shea. I've seen quite a few of his videos. So shout out Nelson Moreno, that's dope. But now let me go back to this channel. Hold on. Sorry about that. All right, let's continue here. My mother, Harriet, was born when grandmother was a slave on the plantation of Squire Sweeney in Howard County, Missouri. After the family moved into Moberly, mother worked for a white family in town. She later went to St. Joseph, Missouri to work for another white family. One day, while she was at work in St. Joseph, she heard a shot and then screams from down the street. She ran out to see what had happened. There was a great commotion and a crowd of people was gathering in front of the house next door. The family living there went by the name of Howard, a man, wife, and 2 children. Both the man and his wife were church members. They appeared to be the most respectable couple. Mrs. Howard had been very active in church affairs and socials. Her husband was frequently absent because, she said, he was a traveling salesman and his work took him out of town for long periods of time. I think we know where this story is going. What the neighbors were not aware of was that Mr. Howard was none other than the legendary Jesse James. He was shot in the back while hanging a picture in his house. The man who killed him was Robert Ford, a member of Jesse's own gang who had turned traitor for a bribe offered by the Burns Detective Agency. When my mother did the laundry, I remember she would often sing the Ballad of Jesse James, a song which became popular after his death. Jesse James was a man, he killed many a man. The man that robbed the Denver train, it was a dirty little coward who shot Mr. Howard, and they laid Jesse James in his grave. Oh, the people held their breath when they heard of Jesse's death, and they wondered how he came to die. He was shot on the sly by Robert Ford, and they laid poor Jesse in his grave. I don't know why it became Frosty the Snowman. I don't know why I sung that to Frosty the Snowman. It just came out that way. I've never heard this tune before. But yeah, anyway. So, Andrew Beja says, Simon, I'm a little late, sorry. Well, shout out to Andrew Beja. Shout out to everybody showing up in the chat. We just reading the story of a black communist, Black Bolshevik, the autobiography of an Afro-American communist, the autobiography of Harry Haywood, a book I've been waiting to read since I was about 20 years old. And since it's summertime, we should all be reading a book anyway. So that's what we're reading right now. We're in chapter 1, Child of a Slave. And yeah, y'all just chop it up in the chat. Anyway. In 1893, my mother went to Chicago to visit her sister and see the exposition. She said she saw Frank James, Jesse's brother. He was out of prison then, a very dignified old man with a long white beard. He had been hired to ride around as an attraction at one of the exhibitions. Let's read that again. He had been hired to ride around as an attraction at one of the exhibitions. Okay, interesting. So they put this criminal on display. Anyway, mother kept moving up to the north by stages. After the job in St. Joseph, she found work in St. Louis. She arrived to find the city in a tense situation. The whole town was on the verge of a race riot. The immediate cause was the murder of an Irish cop named Brady. The black community was elated, for Brady was an N-word hating cop who carved notches on his pistol to show the number of blacks he had killed. Okay. Number 1. You know, in Sinners, if anybody's seen the movie Sinners, you know they try to make this correlation between the black struggle and the Irish struggle. And you know, the Irish, they're just like black people too. In fact, they're the N-words of Europe. When all the Irish came to America, they basically became cops and shot black people in the back. threw them in the police cars and swung them back and forth until their necks cracked. You get what I'm saying? The Irish are not our allies. I repeat, the Irish are not our allies. The Irish are not our allies. I don't care how many big booty gingers they send our way. The Irish are not our allies. And F. Brady. F. Brady. He's been dead more than 100 years. But fuck Brady. We need to find his grave and piss on it. You get what I'm saying? The Irish are not our allies. You get what I'm saying? We don't drink whiskey. We drink Hennessy. We don't drink whiskey. We drink Hennessy. Anyway, I'm continuing here. The black community was elated, for Brady was an N-word hating cop who carved notches on his pistol to show the number of blacks he had killed. Brady finally met his end at the hands of a bad black man who ran a gambling house in Brady's district. Shout out to that bad brother. The gambling, of course, was illegal, but as was often the case, the cops were paid off with a cut from the takings of the house. As the story was told to me, Brady and the gambler met on the street one day and got into an argument. Brady accused the gambler of not giving him his proper cut. This was denied vehemently. Brady then threatened to close the place down. The black man told him, "Don't you come into my place when the game's going on." He then turned and walked off. The scene was witnessed by several blacks, and the news of how the gambler had defied Brady spread immediately throughout the black district. This was bad stuff for Brady. It might lead to N-words getting notions, as the cops put it. A few days passed and Brady made his move. He went to the gambling house when the game was on and was shot dead. Oh, Brady tried to step. Brady tried to step. He said, "I'm going to step in his house when this game is on." Pow, pow, pow. Lay Brady out. Bitch ass Brady. Get your ass down. Oh, Irishman. Send that Irishman up. Fuck that Irish motherfucker. Yeah, put two in him. Put a few in him. Anyway. All right. Kamal says facts. They did the same shit in Philadelphia. Exactly. And in Boston. Ugh. Anyway. Some anonymous black bard wrote a song about it all. Brady, why didn't you run? You know you done wrong. You came in the room when the game was on. They sound like a drill song. they was doing drill songs in 1910. Boy, at the beginning of the 20th century, they were doing drill songs. Don't this shit sound like some shit Chief Keef would write? Brady, why didn't you run? You know you done wrong. You came up in the room when the game was on. Brady went below, looking mighty curious. Devil said, "Where you from?" "I'm from East St. Louis." That shit gangster, bitch. That shit gangster as fuck. East St. Louis? Come this way. I've been expecting you every day. That shit hard. That shit Chief Keef. That shit King Von. Stop playing with me. Our ancestors was turned up. They was trill as fuck. They was trill as fuck. They were shooting Irish cops and making drill songs about it. Come on now. Come on now. I don't want anybody talking shit about hip-hop. And I also need you motherfuckers to realize that shit gangster. That shit is gangster as fuck. They shot the Irish cop and made a drill song about it. Brady, why didn't you run? You know you done wrong. You came up in the game when the game was on. Brady went below. Looking mighty curious. Devil said, "Where you from?" "I'm from East St. Louis." East St. Louis? Hey, come this way. I've been expecting you every day. Rah, rah. Yeah, that shit gangster. I'm sorry. Anyway, this song was immediately popular in the black community and became a symbol of rebellious feelings. Mother said that when she arrived in St. Louis, blacks were singing this song all over town. The police realized the danger in such notions and began to arrest anyone they caught singing it. 40 years later, I was pleasantly surprised to hear Carl Sandburg sing the same song as part of his repertoire of folk ballads of the Midwest. I had not heard it since Mother had sung. Red cheeks. We gonna clap them red cheeks until they turn bright orange. You feel me? We clapping big booty Irish gingers. We clapping big booty Irish gingers. We clapping big booty Irish gingers. In the name of Brady, we gonna smack that booty and say, "Brady told me to do it." Anyway, Andrew Beja says, "You always find good-ass books." I know. I got good taste. I got good taste. And I love to read. And hopefully, reading these books makes you realize the joys of reading too. We should all be finding joy in reading. You feel me? Anyway, Mother later moved to Kansas City, Missouri, and then to South Omaha. Her marriage there to my father was her second. As a very young girl in Moberly, she had married John Harvey, but he was, to use her words, a no-good yellow nigga. They've been hating on them yellow boys since the beginning of time. They've been hating on them yellow boys since the beginning of time. My God. You know, I'm going to feel bad for my son because he's going to be yellow. He's going to be a light-skinned dude. He's going to be a light-skinned dude with what they call that good hair. So they say. So they say. So they say. I don't call it good hair, but this is what the people call it. I'm going to feel bad for my son because he won't have my chocolate advantage. He won't have my melanin magic, you feel me? But damn, that's funny. A no-good yellow N-word, said his mother, who expected me to support him. They had one child, Gertrude, before he deserted her. Gertie came to Omaha sometime after Mother and married my father's youngest brother, George. I have a feeling that Mother promoted this match. The two hard-working, sober Hall brothers must have been quite a catch. Okay. As I remember Mother in my childhood years, she was a small, brown-skinned woman, rather on the plumpish side, with a large and beautiful, soft brown eyes. She had the humped Indian nose of the Thorpe family. My first memory of her is hearing her sing as she did housework. She had a melodious contralto voice and what seemed to me to be an endless and varied repertoire. Much of what I know about this period I learned from her songs. These included lullabies. Go to sleep, you little pickaninny. Mama's gonna swat you if you don't. Okay, that's racist as hell. Imagine your mama singing a song to you. Go to sleep, little nigga. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Andre Beja says, damn, that song is like some K-Flock shit. It sure was. Nelson Moreno says, where's Brady's body? It's in hell. It's in hell. Swirling in shit and piss. Kamal says, they damn sure have. I want to play soccer with it. Damn. Anyway. So, his mama sang many spirituals and jubilee songs. There was also innumerable folk ballads and the popular songs of her day like Down at the Ball and Where Did You Get That Hat? Then there was the old song that slaves sang about their masters fleeing the Union Army. The year of Jubilo. The year of Jubilo. Black people have been making up words since the beginning of time. We said Jubilee and said we call it Jubilo. The year of Jubilo. Oh, darkies, have you seen the massa with the mustache on his face? He was going down the road this morning like he gonna leave this place. Oh, they massa run, ha ha, and the darky sing, ho ho, must be now the kingdom coming, year of Jubilo. Okay, that's hard. That's hard. That's hard. We need to put a beat to this. Put a beat to that. Put a beat to that. Oh, darkies, have you seen the massa with the mustache on his face? He was going down the road, running this morning like he leave the place. Oh, the massa run, ha ha, and the darky sing, ho ho. That's young Jeezy right there. We need the Jeezy ad-libs. Ha ha. Yeah. Hey, man. Come on, man. Hip hop has been around since the slavery days. Since the slavery days, black folks been spitting bars. Come on now. Oh, darkies, have you seen the massa with the mustache on his face? He was going down the road this morning like he was going to leave this place. Oh, the massa run, ha ha, and the darky sing, ho ho, must be now the kingdom coming, the year of Jubilo, oh oh. That shit slap. That shit slap. That's a slapper. That's a slapper from 1862. We got slappers from 1862 in this bitch. Anyway, continuing here. Mother never went to school a day in her life, but she had a phenomenal memory and was a virtual repository of black folklore. My brother Otto taught her to read and write when she was 40 years old. She told stories of life on the plantations, of the hollers they used. When a slave wanted to talk to a friend on a neighboring plantation, she would throw back her head and half sing, half yell, "Oh, Bessie, I want to see you." Often, you could hear one of the hollers a mile away. That's crazy. That's crazy. We got that, man, that's crazy to think about. Our ancestors was like hollering across like miles of distance and you would hear somebody across the way. Hey, bitch, what you doing? Nigga, quit talking to me. Anyway, going to the comments, Kamal says, Dolomite would have been the perfect performer for this one. Anyway, when Mother was a girl, camp meetings were a big part of her life. She had songs she remembered from the meetings like I Don't Feel Weary, No Ways Tired, and she would imitate the preachers with all of their promises of fire and brimstone. Later, when we lived in South Omaha, she was very active in the African-American Methodist Episcopal Church. As a means of raising funds, she used to organize church theatricals. Otto would help her read the plays. She would then direct them and usually play the leading role herself. She was a natural mimic. I had heard her go through entire plays from beginning to end, imitating the voices, even the male ones, and the actions of the performers. In addition to caring for Otto, Eppa, and myself, Mother got jobs catering parties for rich white families in North Omaha. She would bring us back all sorts of goodies and leftovers from these parties. Sometimes she would get together with her friends among the other domestics, and they would have a great time panning their employers and exchanging news of the white folks' scandalous doings. Mother had the great fighting spirit of her family. She was a strong-minded woman with great ambition for her children, especially for us boys. Eppa, who was a plain black girl, was sensitive but physically tough, courageous, and a regular tomboy. Imagine... Imagine writing a book about your life and you call your sister a plain black girl. It's like what? That's low-key offensive. I would have to fight my brother if he wrote that about me. Anyway. Worried about her future, Mother insisted that she learn the piano and arranged for her to take lessons at 25 cents each. Though she learned to play minor classics such as Poet and Peasant, arias from such operas as Ada and Il Trovatore accompanied the choir and so on, Eppa never liked music very much and was not consoled by it the way Mother was. As a wife, Mother had a way of making Father feel the part of the man in the house. She flattered his ego and always addressed him as Mr. Hall in front of guests and us children. Sounds like a very healthy, happy, family he grew up in with a lot of history, a lot of love, a lot of culture, a lot of culture in this house. Anyway. Andre Bea says, most disrespectful disses in one book, worse than the Naughty Bop. I'm telling you, we gonna Naughty Bop on Brady's grave. We gonna make a when Derek Chauvin died, we gotta step on that bitch. You know what I mean? We gonna make a drill beat, we gonna dance on that bitch, and we gonna do the Brady Bop on that bitch. Anyway. So, life in South Omaha. You ask what town I love the best? South Omaha. Hey, South Omaha. The fairest town of all the rest. South Omaha. Hey, South Omaha. Hey, where's yonder Papillion's limp stream? To where Missouri's waters gleam. Oh, fairest town, oh, town of mine. South Omaha. Hey, South Omaha. Hey, y'all ain't know that one. That's a Lil Jon B-side. Y'all didn't catch that? That was on that Kings of Crunk album, the South Omaha joint. It featured Petey Pablo, Ludacris, and the East Side Boys. China White. South Omaha. I ain't never heard a nigga rep South Omaha, bro. I ain't never heard of a nigga coming from, yeah, bro, I'm from Nebraska, that big NB. What you know about that O? I took it to the O. You took it to O Block? No, I took it to South Omaha. Anyway, I took it to South Omaha. That's crazy. That's crazy, bruh. Talk about South Omaha. Hey, you ask what town I love the best? South Omaha. No, bruh, no. No. Anyway, I'm sorry. Continuing here. In the early part of the century, the days of my youth, South Omaha. I can't even say that. I can't even say that with a straight face. South Omaha, bruh. In the early part of the century, the days of my youth, South Omaha was an independent city. In 1915, it was annexed to become part of the larger city of Omaha. Like many Midwestern towns, the city took its name from the original inhabitants of the area. In this case, it was the Omaha Indians of the Sioux tribal family. The area was a camping ground of the Lewis and Clark expedition of 1804. It grew in importance when it became a licensed trading post and an important outfitting point during the Colorado Gold Rush. But the main growth of South Omaha The main growth of South Omaha came in the 1880s as the meatpacking industry developed. In 1877, the first refrigerated railroad cars were perfected. This made it possible to slaughter livestock in the Midwest and ship the meat to the large markets in eastern cities. As a result, the meatpacking industry grew tremendously in the Midwest. The city leaders saw the opportunity and encouraged the expanding packing industry to settle there, offering them special tax concessions and so forth. The town, situated on a plateau back from the Big Muddy, the Missouri River, began to grow. Soon it was almost an industrial suburb of Omaha and was one of the 3 largest packing centers in the country. All of the big packers of the time, Armour, Swift, Wilson, and Cuday, had big branches there. Cuday's main plant was in South Omaha. Like, for all the people that have not been to America, let's just make this clear. The Midwest is the boring, white bread, all the stereotypes you think about Americans. That's basically the Midwest. And the sad thing is the Midwest takes up a big chunk of the country. I would say the Midwest is everything from, like, West Pennsylvania all the way to Oregon. And everything above Arkansas. So, like, the latitude of Arkansas and everything in between West Pennsylvania to Oregon is essentially the Midwest, in my mind. I know some people are going to say, no, Colorado is not. Colorado's Midwest. You know what I'm saying? Montana, Midwest. I don't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? So, like, everything in the Midwest is boring, is flat. This man is talking about meat packing plants and refrigeration shit like we actually care. But this is how Midwestern people relate. I used to work at Armour's factory. Yeah, the refrigeration plant. Yeah, they hired a lot of Negroes back then. Like, Midwest is boring as hell. Midwest, boring flatlands. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, continuing. The industry brought with it growing railroad traffic. As a boy, I watched the dozens of lines of cars as they carried livestock in from the west and butchered meat to ship out to the east. The Burlington, the Chicago, the Northwestern, the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific, the Illinois Central, the Rock Island, the Union Pacific, all of these lines had terminals there. This sounds like Japanese to most Americans now because we don't know what trains are. Most Americans don't know what trains are. We've never ridden on a train. Trains are things from ancient history when everything was in black and white. This man is describing ancient Greek hieroglyphics to me right now. Because what the hell? There are trains that dot across the country? No. We can't have that in America. You got to hop in a big-ass car and pay $3,000 just to drive around your city just to get to work and back. Anyway, Kamal says, Middle America, my military grandfather warned us. They warned you. They warned you about South Omaha. Hey, South Omaha. Hey. Anyway, when I was born in 1898, South Omaha, hey, was a bustling town of about 20,000 people. A bustling town of 20,000 people. Back when the U.S. population was like, 7 million. It was like the 13th biggest metropolis in the country. Anyway. When I was born in 1898, South Omaha was a bustling town of about 20,000 people. Most of these 20,000 people were foreign-born and first-generation immigrants. The 2 largest groups were the Irish, and the Bohemians, or Czechs, hey. There was a sprinkling of other Slavic groups, Poles, Russians, Serbs, as well as Germans, Greeks, and Italians. The Bohemians were the largest ethnic group in town. They lived mainly in the southern part of town towards the river in the Brown Park and Albright sections. One thing that impressed me was their concern with education. They were a cultured group of people. I can't remember any of them being illiterate, and they had their own newspaper. They were involved in the political wheelings and dealings of the town and were successful at it. At one time, both the mayor and the chief of police were Bohemians. The Irish were the second largest group, scattered throughout the town. The newly arrived poor shanty Irish would first settle on Indian Hill, near the stockyards. There were 2 classes of Irish, the shanty Irish on the one hand and the old settlers or the lace curtain Irish on the other. This second group, who had settled only 1 generation before, was mostly made up of middle-class, white-collar, civil service, and professional workers who lived near North Omaha. There were also a few Irish who were very rich, managers and executives who lived in Omaha proper. They had become well assimilated into the community. The tendency was for the poorer Irish to live in South Omaha, and those who had made it to one degree or another would move up to North Omaha or Omaha proper. There were only a few dozen black families in South Omaha, scattered throughout the community. There was no black ghetto and, as I saw it, no Negro problem. This was due undoubtedly to our small numbers, although there was a relatively large number of blacks living in North Omaha. The black community there had grown after blacks were brought in as strike breakers during the 1894 strike in the packing industry, but no real ghetto developed until after World War I. Our family lived in the heart of the Bohemian neighborhood in South Omaha. Nearly all of our neighbors were Bohemians. They came from many backgrounds. There were workers and peasants, professionals, artists, musicians, and other skilled artisans, all fleeing from the oppressive rule of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Why didn't we close the border then? People fleeing, running for their lives, trying to chase the American dream. I wonder why they were allowed in. Somebody tell me in the chat. How come the people fleeing persecution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire were able to move into America, just show their passports, and just begin to take over neighborhoods? Why could they just do it? Huh? Let me know. Kamal says, nope, you're spot on, Simon. I lived in North Dakota and Greater Omaha. Just bland. Just bland. Just you say bland with the back of your throat. It was bland. Unseasoned chicken. So they were friendly people and kept up their language and traditions. On Saturdays, families would gather at one of the beer gardens to sing and dance. I remember watching them dance Schottisches and polkas, listening to their beautiful music of their bands and orchestras, or running after their great marching bands when they were in a parade. On special occasions, they would bring out their colorful costumes. Much of their community life centered around the gymnastics clubs, Sokol's or Turner's Halls, which they had established. There were differences in how the ethnic groups related to each other and to the blacks in town. In those days, Indian Hill was one of the stomping ground of teenage Irish toughs. One day, a mob of predominantly Irish youths ran the small Greek colony out of town when one of their members allegedly killed an Irish cop. So the whites were committing violence against each other. The whites were over here doing just wicked, foul shit to each other. I remember seeing the Greek community leaving town one Sunday afternoon. There were men, women, and children, about 100 in all, walking down the railroad tracks, carrying everything they could hold. Some of their houses had been burned, and a few of them had been beaten up in town. Damn. We should have seen the danger for us in this. Yeah, because if the whites are doing it to each other, imagine what they'll do to your black ass. But one black man even boasted to my father about how he had helped run the Greeks out. Okay, that... bruh, that was a MAGA. See, black MAGA goes way back. This one black man was hanging out with some Irish boys, chasing the Greeks out of town, and he thought he was one of them. Okay. My father called him a fool. What business did you have helping that bunch of whites? Next time it might be you they run out. The incident was an ominous sign of tensions that were to come many years later. At the time, however, our family got along well with all the immigrant families in our immediate neighborhood. I loved the sweet, haunting melodies of the Irish folk ballads, Rose of Trolley, Mother Mashery, and many of the other popular songs, like My Irish Molly O and Agra Wahan, I Want to Go Back to Oregon. There was a Bohemian couple living next door. On occasion, Mr. Rehu would get a bit too much under his belt. He'd come home and really raise hell. When this happened, Mrs. Rehu scurried to Officer Bingham, the black cop, to get some help. I remember one afternoon when Bingham came to lend a hand in taming him. The Bohemian was a little guy compared to him. Officer Bingham threw him down out in the yard and plunked himself down on Rehu's back. And then Officer Bingham fucked Mr. Rehu's wife viciously in front of him. Viciously pounded. After he knocked down this drunk German bastard who came to gentrify America, he viciously fucked his wife in front of him. Kamal says, damn, so much for Bumpy Johnson. Dust flew as he kicked and thrashed and tried to get out from under the black man. Bingham just rode the storm, and when Rahal raised his head, he'd smack him around until the rebellion subsided. That's hard. Our ancestors were so trill. Had enough, he'd yell at his victim, you gonna behave now and mind what Mrs. Reha says? All the while, she was running around them, waving her apron. See, this is crazy. See, a lot of the times we hear the stories about, what life was like for black folks back then, like at the turn of the century, of the turn of the 20th century, right? And we just think black folks were just unempowered. We weren't men. But he is telling the story of a black male cop slapping around this drunk white man who was beating up his wife, and he came to save the day. The cop puts the white man on the ground. The white man is protesting and fighting against him, speaking in his little German, all sorts of curse words and swear words against this black man. And this black man says, "Stop it. Stop it. Shut up. Shut up," and slaps this man in front of his wife. Hard. That's hard. That's hard. So, "Beat him some more, Mr. Bingham, please. Make him be good," said the wife. Finally, either Bingham got tired of Mr. Rahal, just gave out, and peace returned to the neighborhood. That's such a story. That's such a cool-ass story. That's a cool-ass story. Police and community relations were less tense then. The cops knew how to control the situation without using guns. Often this meant they'd get into actual fistfights. In those days, there was a big black guy in town named Sam, a beef lugger like my father. Sam was a nice, quiet guy, but on occasion he'd go on a drunk and fight anyone within arm's length, which was a big area. The cops generally handled it by fighting it out with him. See, I wish police would start doing that. Instead of taking brothers to jail, the police just pull up and be like, "Hey, what's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up?" You know what I mean? Like, that would be sick. Why don't we go back to those days? The police don't have to pull out the piece. You know what I'm saying? Like, police just pull up and they just be like, "Hey, what's poppin'? What's good? What's good?" You know what I mean? Anyway. But I remember one time Sam really caused a row. He was outside a bar on J Street up in Omaha proper. During the course of his drunk, he'd beaten up 5 or 6 of the regular cops. Damn, okay, that's why the police don't do it, because the police don't got hands like that. This called for extreme measures. Briggs, the chief of police, came to the scene to restore law and order. He marched up to Sam and threw out his chest. "Now, Sam, it's time for you to behave, you hear?" He even pulled out his .38 to show he meant business. But Sam wasn't ready to behave. He came at Briggs, intending to lay him out like he'd done with the other officers. Briggs backed up one step at a time. "Sam, you stop. You hear me, Sam? Time to stop now." Sam forced Briggs all the way back to his carriage. Once Briggs was in, he delivered his final threat. "Sam, you come down to City Hall on Monday and see me. This just can't happen this way." Briggs drove off. Shout out to Sam. Sam is a G. Sam is a G. Big Sam, said Nelson. Big Sam. Andre Beja says he's got to go. Shout out to Andre Beja. That's hard. Big Sam was slapping police around. Big black man running around the city. Turn of the century. The year is 1902. Who knows? Who knows? Big Sam knocking out police officers. The chief of police comes, puts a pistol on Sam, and says, "Sam, you better calm down now." Sam like, "What you gonna do? What you gonna do? What? And the police chief gets back in his car. See, this is the point of reading. This is the point of reading these books. This is the point of reading these books. Kamal says, "At no point in history would I believe in universal inferiority." I agree. And then the punching sign on the police. This is the thing. This is why we read these books. Because if you just watch these stupid-ass movies, you get what I'm saying? Like Sinners, like anything that comes out of Hollywood, when they tell our stories, they're just going to make us seem like we were getting bullied around by white men. And let's keep it real. Hollywood is ran by white men. So they're going to tell the story like, yeah, we were bullying black men this entire time. When really in history, we were always showing resistance. We were always fucking their wives. We were always knocking them out. We fought wars against them. We had slave rebellions. We were fucking up the crops. We were poisoning master. We were fighting the police chief. We were putting holes in racist Irish cops like Brady. You get me? We were doing a lot of gangster shit. We were doing a lot of gangster shit for a long ass time, and this is why we read these books. Because between the pages of the books is where the true history can be found. Between the pages of these books is where the true history can be found. Because Hollywood would make you think that black men were pussy. That we were pussy throughout the 500 years of enslavement, when this is not true. Black men were never pussy. We were never pussy during the time of our enslavement and during the times of apartheid. We were always fighting back, and we were always fucking their wives. Facts. Okay? Anyway, continuing here. So the police chief drove off. Monday morning came, and Sam went down to City Hall. He was fined for being drunk and disorderly. He didn't fight the court and willingly paid the fine. It seemed like an unwritten agreement. The cops wouldn't shoot when Sam went on a spree. When it was over, Sam would go and pay his fine, and that would end the whole business. Shout out to Sam. Big Sam. All right? Kamal says Jack Johnson on Chicago streets. No, this wasn't Chicago streets. This is South Omaha, where it goes down. Hey, you ain't know? South Omaha. South Omaha, where it goes down. Our family was the only black family in our neighborhood, and we were pretty well insulated from the racist pressure of the outside world. As children, we were only dimly aware of what Du Bois called the veil of color between the races. I first became aware of the veil, not from anything that had happened in the town, but from what my parents and grandparents told me of how Southern whites had persecuted blacks and of how they had suffered under slavery. I remember grandfather and grandmother Thorpe showing me the scars that they had on their backs from the overseer's lash. I remember Pa reading newspaper accounts of the endless reign of terror, the endless reign of lynch terror in the South, and about the 1908 riots in Springfield, Illinois. In 1908, Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion, defeated the Great White Hope, Jim Jeffries. Pa said that it was the occasion for a new round of lynchings in the South. There were other great black fighters, Sam Langford, Joe Jeanette, and Sam McVeigh, for instance, but Johnson was the first black heavyweight to be able to fight for the championship and the first to win it. Shout out to Jack Johnson. All right. Nelson Moreno says the Portuguese got extremely violated in Angola War. Facts. Shout out to Mozambique. Shout out to Angola. Shout out to Guinea-Bissau. I forgot which one speaks Portuguese. They were whooping Portuguese ass. You feel me? Nelson Moreno says, my mom said they were throwing rocks when the Portuguese got ran out of Cape Verde. Who was the pussy? Facts. Facts. Throwing rocks at the Portuguese. Man. This is so dope. It's so dope. So dope. Anyway. Continuing here. So, his father was conscious that he was a black man in a racist world. I'm black, they never let me forget it. I'm black, I'll never forget it. Jeffries had been pushed as the hope of the white race to reclaim the heavyweight crown from Johnson. When Johnson knocked out Jeffries, it was a symbol of black defiance and self-assertion. To blacks, the victory meant pride and hope. It was a challenge to the authority of bigoted whites, and to them it called for extra measures to keep the N-words in their place. To us children, black repression seemed restricted to the South, outside the orbit of our immediate experience. As I saw it then, there was no deliberate plot of white against black. I thought there were two kinds of white folks, good and bad, and the latter were mainly in the South. Most of those I knew in South Omaha were good people. Disillusionment came later in my life. The friendly interracial atmosphere of South Omaha was illustrated by the presence of Officer Bingham and Officer Balu, two black cops in the town's small police force. Bingham was a big, black, and jolly fellow. His beat was our neighborhood. Balu was a tall, slim, ramrod, straight, and light-skinned black brother. He was a veteran of the Black 10th Cavalry. He had fought in the Indian Wars against Geronimo and had participated in the chase for Billy the Kid. Balu was also a veteran of the Spanish-American War. All the kids, black and white, regarded him with a special awe and respect. Both black officers were treated as respectable members of the community, liked by the people because they had their confidence. While they wore guns, they never seemed to use them. These cops fought tough characters with fists and clubs, pulling a gun only rarely, and then only in self-defense. It seemed that a large part of their duty was to keep the kids out of mischief. It sounds like, this is the thing, this is why it's important for young black boys to have good role models, because these two cops he's describing, Officer Bingham and Officer Balu, were two black men who had authority and power in the community and stuff like that. I want to give a shout out to them because I had two black men in my life, Mr. Naylor, Mr. January, my two elementary school teachers, and they were both the polar opposites. Mr. January, very tall, skinny black man. He was our teacher in 6th grade. And also Mr. Naylor, very muscular, thick-necked, black man. Both of them very educated, very patient, very intelligent as well. So shout out to both of them. Going to Avery joined the chat. He said, free baby oil Johnson and Johnson. Shout out to Avery. Shout out to Avery Adams. Diddy is free. We are happy about this on this channel. We are happy Diddy is free on this channel. I told y'all that he should be free, and I hope he is free. I actually didn't think he was going to beat them many charges, but we actually did. We're actually glad that he did. All right. Nelson Moreno says, Diddy about to have the ultimate freak-off, a 100-day freak-off. I will not be surprised. He's going to have the super NDAs on them freak-offs. He's going to have videotapes and cameras everywhere. He's going to have that shit in HD. You feel me? All right. Kamal says, the Lumbee tribe ran the KKK out of Maxton, North Carolina. We could do this all day. Shout out to Kamal up in the chat. He's spitting. He's spitting facts. All right. Avery says, stream it live on Kick. What is... Y'all talking about the freak-offs? Y'all want to see a freak off live? I don't want to see a freak off video. I could live my entire life. I don't care if they leak tomorrow. Okay, if they leak tomorrow, I'm going to watch the freak off videos. If they leak tomorrow, I'm going to watch them. But I don't want to see them. I really don't want to, like, them to be everywhere. But I wouldn't be surprised if the feds leak the freak off videos. What do you think? Do you think the feds will leak the freak off videos? Anyway, continuing here. Officer Bingham, the bohemian woman across the street, would call, "Would you please keep an eye on my boy Frontal?" Who had a baby named Frontal? What type of name is that for a baby? Frontal. What type of... Man, I don't... Come on now. See, he don't make trouble. Don't worry, Mrs. Brazda. He's a good boy. Has Haywood been a good boy? Oh, yes, Mrs. Hall. He's all right. And he would stop for a chat. My sister Eppa, a lad called Willie Sterrins, and I were the only black kids in the Brown Park Elementary School. My brother Otto had already graduated and was in South Omaha High. Our schoolmates were predominantly Bohemians, with a sprinkling of Irish, German, and a few Anglo-Americans. My close childhood chums include two Bohemian kids, Frank Brazda and Jimmy Rahau, an Anglo-Irish kid, Earl Power and Willie Ziegler, who was of German parentage. We were an inseparable fivesome in and out of each other's homes all the time. Interesting. See, this is another thing that, why we should read these books. You would think at the turn of the 20th century, these cities were segregated. South Omaha, it would have been impossible for a young black boy to have a group full of white friends from different, ethnicities or nationalities, right? But America is more complicated than that. History is more complicated than that, and that's why we read these texts. You feel me? Kamal says, I thought he would beat the Rico. Okay, Kamal had the prediction all along. Nelson Moreno says, I'm starting with gay freak-offs, no Diddy. Nelson, you a nasty boy. You a nasty, nasty boy. Bad boy. You a bad boy for life. Take that. During my first years in school, I was plagued by asthma and was absent from my school many months at a time. The result was that I was a year behind. I finally outgrew this infirmity and became a strong, healthy boy. By the time I reached the 8th grade, I had become one of the best students in my class, sharing this honor with a Bohemian girl, Bertha Himmel. Both of us could solve any problem in arithmetic, both were good at spelling, and at inter-school spelling bees, our school usually won the first prize. My self-confidence was encouraged by my teachers, all of whom were white and yet uniformly kind and sympathetic. Of course, like all kids, I had plenty of fights, but race seldom involved. Occasionally, I would hear the word N-word. While it evoked anger in me, it seemed no more disparaging than the term bohunk, sheeny, dago, shanty Irish, or poor white trash. We were calling them poor white trash back then. In 1903, we were calling poor white trash. That's fire. But what the hell is a bohunk? Bohunk. Bohunk sounds like what you call a fine Asian man. All were terms of common usage, interchangeable as slurring epithets on one's ethnic background, and usually employed outside the hearing of the person in question. In contrast to the daily life of the neighborhood, however, the virus of racism was subtly injected into the classroom at the Brown Park school I attended. The 5 races of mankind illustrated in our geography books portrayed the Negro with the receding forehead and prognathous jaw of a gorilla. There was a complete absence of black heroes in the history books, supporting the inference that the black man had contributed nothing to civilization. We were taught that blacks were brought out of the savagery of the jungles of Africa and introduced to civilization through slavery under the benevolent auspices of the white man. In spite of my father's submissive attitude, it is to him that I must give credit for scotching this big lie about the Negro's past. His attitude grew out of his concern for our survival in a hostile environment. He felt most strongly that the Negro was not innately inferior. He perceived that his children must have some sense of self-respect and confidence to sustain them, until that distant day when, through obvious merit and just deserts, the blacks would receive their award of equality and recognition. Father possessed an amazing store of knowledge which he had culled from his readings. He would tell us about the black civilizations of ancient Egypt, Ethiopia, and Kush. He would quote from the Song of Solomon, I am black and comely. Oh yeah, daughters of Jerusalem. Hey, Solomon was telling them hoes, hey, I'm that big black boy that you want. Yeah, big, black, and sexy. Solomon. Yeah, that's who I am. He would tell us about black soldiers in the Civil War, about the massacre of blacks at Fort Pillow and the battle cry they used thereafter. Remember Fort Pillow. Remember Fort Pillow. He knew about the Haitian Revolution, the defeat of Napoleon's army by Toussaint Louverture, Dessalines, and Jean Christophe. He told us about the famous Zulu chief Shaka in South Africa, about Alexander Dumas, the great French romanticist, and Pushkin, the great Russian poet, who were both black. Okay, his father was hella woke. His father was more woke than 90% of people alive today. You get what I'm saying? Anyway, father said that he taught himself to read and write. He had an extensive library which took up half of one of the halls in our living room. His books were mainly historical works. His favorite subjects, they included such titles as The Decisive Battles of the World, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, and many histories of England, France, Germany, and Russia. He had Stanley in Africa and a number of biographies of famous men, including Napoleon, Caesar, and Hannibal, who father said was a Negro. He had Scott's Ivanhoe and his Waverley novels, Bulwer Lytton, Alexander Dumas's novels, and The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, and Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington. On another wall, there was a huge picture of the charge of the 25th Black Infantry and the 10th Cavalry at San Juan Hill, rescuing Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders. There were pictures of Frederick Douglass and, of course, his hero, Booker T. Washington. He would lecture to us on history, displaying his extensive knowledge. He was a great admirer of Napoleon. He would get into one of his lecturing moods and pace up and down with his hands behind his back before the rapt audience of my sister Eppa and myself. Talking about the Battle of Waterloo, he would say, Wellington was in a tough spot that day. Napoleon was about to whip him. The trouble was Blücher hadn't shown up. Who was he, Pa? He was the German general who was supposed to reinforce Wellington with 13,000 Prussian troops. Wellington was getting awfully nervous, walking up and down behind the lines and saying, "Oh, if Blücher fails to come, where is Blücher?" Did he finally get there, Pa? Yes, son, he finally got there and turned the tide of battle. And if he hadn't shown up and Napoleon had won, the whole course of history would have changed. His father was hella deep. His father was hella deep because I didn't even know about that. You know what I'm saying? Now, it's different. Back then, they didn't have TV. They didn't have Instagram. This is the thing. Instagram, social media, TikTok has us all looking at big booty twerking women and fighting videos. And the next ridiculous thing Trump says. If his father were alive in 2025 instead of 1925, he would know all about the shit that Dr. Umar said yesterday. Or Will Smith and Jada's dysfunctional relationship. And he wouldn't know shit about Napoleon. This is why we have to put down the social media sometimes and pick up that books. We have to pick up them books, baby, because this shit is ridiculous. How does black man back in 1902 know more about European history, black history, American history than most black folks alive today? And he didn't have the internet or nothing like that. Anyway. It was through father that I entered the world of books. I developed an unquenchable thirst to learn about people and their history. I remember going to the town library when I was 9 or 10 and asking, "Do you have a history of the world for children?" My first love became the historical novel. I loved George Henty's books. They always dealt with the exploits of a 16-year-old during an important historical period. Through Henty's heroes, I too was with Bonnie Prince Charlie, with Wellington in the Spanish Peninsula, with Gustavus Adolphus at Leuston in the 30 Years' War, with Clive in India, and under Drake's flag around the world. I was also fascinated by romances of the feudal period, such as When Knighthood Was in Flower and Ivanhoe. I read Twain's Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer and the works of H. Rider Haggard. I went through a definite Anglophile stage, in part due to the influence of a Jamaican named Mr. Williams, who worked as an assistant janitor with my father. Mr. Williams was a huge black man with scars all over his face. He was a former stoker in the British Navy. I was attracted by his strange accent and haughty demeanor. Evidently, he saw in me an appreciative audience. I would listen with open mouth and wonder at the stories of the strange places he had seen, of his adventures in faraway lands. He was a real British patriot, a black imperialist, if such was possible, which is weird, but did exist. And go check out the book Black and British by David Olusoga. He talks more about the black people that fought for the empire, which is very interesting. He would declare, "The sun never sets on the British Empire," and then sing, "Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves." He quoted Napoleon as allegedly saying, "Britain is a small garden, but she grows some bitter weeds. And give me French soldiers and British officers, and I will conquer the world." I pictured myself as a British sailor and read 2 years before the mast and Battle of Trafalgar. Do you think they would let me join the British Navy? I asked Mr. Williams. No, my lad, he answered. You have to be a British citizen or subject to do that. I was quite disappointed. But it was not only British romance that fascinated me. At about the age of 12, I became a Francophile. I read all of Dumas's novels and quite a number of other novels about France. I had begun to read French history, which to me turned out to be as interesting as the novels and equally romantic. I read about Joan of Arc, the Hundred Years' War, Francis I, about Catherine de' Medici, the Huguenots and Admiral Coligny, and Duc de Guy, the massacre at St. Bartholomew Eve, or the Night of the Long Knives. Then the French Revolution, A Tale of Two Cities, the guillotining of Charlotte de Corday, and the assassination of Marat. See, how are our ancestors? How are our ancestors so well read and we're so dumb? How? I ain't read none of that. Occasionally, the ugly reality of race would intrude upon the dream world of my childhood. I distinctly remember two such occasions. One was when a white family from Arkansas moved across the alley from us. Mr. Fraught, the patriarch of the clan, was a typical redneck peckerwood. He would sit around the storefront chewing tobacco, telling how they treated N-words down his way. They were made to stay in their place, down in the cotton patch, not in factories taking white men's jobs. As I remember, his racist harangues did not make much of an impression on the local white audience. Apparently, at that time, there was no feeling of competition in South Omaha because there were so few blacks. I would also imagine that his slovenly appearance did not jibe with his white supremacist pretensions. One day, a substitute teacher took over our class. I was about 10 years old. The substitute was a Southerner from Arkansas. During history class, she started talking about the Civil War. The slaves, she said, did not really want freedom because they were happy as they were. They would have been freed by their masters in a few years anyway. Her villain was General Grant, whom she contrasted unfavorably with General Robert E. Lee. Oh God, racist teacher alert, racist teacher alert. Lee was a gentleman, she put forth, but Grant was a cigar-smoking, liquor-drinking roughneck. Yeah, but Lee owned slaves. I'm so mad I went to a middle school named Robert E. Lee. She didn't like Sherman either and talked about his murdering rampage through Georgia. I wasn't about to take all of this and challenge her. I don't know about General Grant's habits, but he did beat Lee. Besides, Lee couldn't have been much of a gentleman. He owned slaves. Livid with rage, she shouted, "That's enough. What I could say about you." Well, what could you say, I challenged. She apparently saw that wild racist statements wouldn't work in this situation and that I was trying to provoke her to do something like that. She cut short the argument, shouting, "That's enough." "Yes, that's enough," I sassed. During the heated exchange, I felt that I had the sympathy of some of my classmates. After school, some gathered around me and said, "You certainly told her off." When I told Mother, she supported me. "You done right, son," she said. But Father was not so sure. "You might have gotten into trouble, boy." I feel now that one of the reasons for my self-confidence during my childhood years and why the racist notions of innate black inferiority left me cold was my older brother Otto. His example belied such claims. He was the most brilliant one in my family, and probably in all of South Omaha. He had skipped a grade both in grade school and in high school and was a real prodigy. He was a natural poet and won many prizes in composition. His poem on the charge of the 25th Black Infantry and 10th Cavalry at San Juan Hill was published in one of the Omaha dailies. Otto was praised by all of his teachers. An unusual boy, they said, clearly destined to become a leader of his race. One day, one of his teachers and a Catholic priest called on Mother and Frank to talk about Otto's future. Otto was about 14 at the time. They suggested that he might be good material for the priesthood and that there was a possibility of his getting a scholarship for Creighton University, Omaha's famous Jesuit school. The teacher suggested that if this were agreed to, he should take up Latin. My parents were extremely flattered despite the fact that they were good Methodists, AME. Even Father, who did not seem ambitious for his children, was impressed. But when the proposition was placed before Otto, he vehemently disagreed. He did not want to become a priest, nor did he want to study Latin. He wanted, he said, to be an architect. Doctors, dentists, teachers, and preachers, those were the professions for an ambitious black in those days. An architect, they exclaimed in amazement. Who ever heard of a black architect? Who ever heard of a black priest? Otto retorted. At that time, there were only 2 or 3 black priests in the entire U.S. But Otto, mother argued, you'll have the support of a lot of prominent white folks. They'll help you through college. But Otto would have none of it. Undoubtedly, my parents thought that they could finally wear down the opposition and that he would become more amenable in time. They did force him to take Latin, a subject he hated. Otto stayed in school but no longer seemed interested in his studies. He dropped out of school suddenly in senior year. He was 16. He left home and got a job as a bellhop in a hotel in North Omaha's black community. This move cut completely the few remaining ties he had with his white age group in South Omaha. Otto's dropout from high school evidently signified that he had given up the struggle to be somebody in the white world. He had become disillusioned with the white world and therefore sought identity with his own people. During my childhood years, our relationship had never been close. There was, of course, the age gap. He was 7 years older. But even in later years, when we were closer and had more in common, we never talked about our childhood. I don't know why. As a child, I had been proud of his academic feats and boasted about them to my friends. At the time he left high school, Otto was the only black in South Omaha High and was about to become its first black graduate. Highly praised by his teachers and popular among his fellow students, he was a real showpiece of the school. What caused him to drop out of school in his senior year? Thinking back on it, I don't believe that it had anything to do with the attempt to make him a priest. I think that he had won that battle a couple of years before. At least I never heard the matter mentioned again. Otto undoubtedly had had high aspirations at one time, as evidenced by his desire to become an architect. Somewhere along the line they disappeared. Perhaps a contributing factor was the accumulating effect of Otto's malady. On occasion, Mother would remind us that Otto had water on the brain and that he was different from Eppa and myself. At the time, he seemed smarter than us, more independent, and in rebellion against Pa's lack of encouragement, moral support, and his parental authority. Certainly, in adult life, Otto used to sleep about 10 hours a day and very often fell asleep in meetings. He seemed to lack the ability of prolonged concentration, although whatever brain damage he may have suffered never affected the quickness of his mind and ability to grasp the nub of any question or the capacity for leadership, which he showed on a number of occasions. But more debilitating, probably than any physical disease, was the generation gap of that era, between parents of slave backgrounds and children born free, particularly in the North. Otto's dropping out of school and his later radical political development were undoubtedly related to a conflict more intense than the ones of today. Father was an ardent follower of Booker T. Washington. His ambition for his sons were very modest, to put it mildly. He undoubtedly would have been satisfied if he would become, or if he could become, good law-abiding citizens with stable jobs. He thought of jobs a notch or two above his own station, like a postal employee, a skilled tradesman, or a clerk in the civil service. The offer of a scholarship for the priesthood was, therefore, simply beyond his expectations, and I guess that the old man was deeply disappointed at Otto's rejection of it. Otto was quite independent and would not conform to Father's idea of discipline. For example, he was completely turned off on the question of religion, and Father could not force him to go to church. I don't remember Otto ever going to church with the family. Father claimed that Otto was irresponsible and wild. As a result, there was a mutual hostility between them. The results were numerous thrashings when Otto was young and violent quarrels between them as he grew older. Mother would usually defend Otto. Grandpa Thorpe, himself a strict disciplinarian, would warn Mother, "Hattie, you mark my words, the boy is going to land in the pen." That's what my father used to say about me. Something about being the firstborn son. My father used to say the same thing about me, still says the same thing about me. I don't know why. I'm successful. At some point, Otto came to the conclusion that there was no use in continuing his education. He must have felt that it was irrelevant. Opportunities for educated blacks were few, even in North Omaha's black community where there were only a few professionals. In that community, there were a few preachers, one doctor, one dentist, and one or two teachers. Black businesses consisted of owners in several undertaking establishments, a couple of black barbershops, and a few pool rooms. The only other blacks in any sort of middle-class positions were a few postal employees, civil service workers, Pullman porters, and waiters. Then, too, Otto had passed through the age of puberty and was becoming more and more conscious of his race. Along with the natural detachment and withdrawal from childhood socializing with girls, in his case, white girls who were former childhood sweethearts, wow, Otto experienced a withdrawal and non-socialization because of his race. He ended up quite alone because there were not many black kids his age in South Omaha. There wasn't much contact with the black kids from North Omaha either. As a very sensitive person on the verge of manhood, I imagine he began to feel these changes keenly. Very interesting. Very interesting life as he's breaking down his brother's story, and I really love the turn the book is taking. I love that this turn is becoming more personal in analyzing the complexities of his family's dynamics, right? So, after he dropped out of school in 1908, Otto was soon attracted to the sporting life, the pool halls, the sporting houses of North Omaha. He wanted to be among black people. He was anxious to get away from father. Thus, he left home and got jobs as a bellhop, shoeshine boy, and busboy. He began to absorb a new way of life, stepping fully into the social life of the black community in North Omaha. He'd evidently heeded the call of the blood and gone back to the race. It was not until a few years later, when I had similar experiences, that I understood that Otto had arrived at the first stage in his identity crisis and had gone to where he felt he belonged. He would come home quite often, though, flaunting his new clothes, a box-back suit fitting nowhere but the shoulders, high-heeled Stacey Adams button shoes, and Stetson hat. He'd give a few dollars to mother and some dimes to me and my sister. Sometimes he would bring a pretty girl friend with him, but most of the time he would bring a young man, Henry Stearns, who was a piano player. Uh-oh, where's this going? He played a style popular in those days, later to be known as boogie woogie, in which the piano was the whole orchestra. He played Ma Rainey's famous blues, Make Me a Pallet on Your Floor, Make It Where Your Man Will Never Know, and the old favorite, Alabama Bound. Alabama bound, I'm Alabama bound. Oh, babe, don't leave me here. Just leave a dime for beer. Our ancestors were wilding in them songs, for real. A boy of 10 at the time, I was tremendously impressed. There is no doubt that Otto's experience served to weaken some of my childish notions about making it in the white world. All right, we're going to wrap it up here. This has been an interesting live stream. Really enjoyed reading this book. We'll pick up on Haley's comment and my religion when we start reading on this tomorrow. Very dope book. I'm very glad I picked it up. I was intimidated by this book for years, but I'm finally glad I'm reading it. I hope y'all enjoyed this live stream too. Shout out to everybody that jumped into the chat. Shout out to Nelson Moreno. Shout out to Kamal. Shout out to Avery Adams. Shout out to Andre Beja. Shout out to who else? Who else was in this thing? Sim Falzo 15, and everybody else who joined this first reading of this very long, very interesting, very captivating autobiography of a man who lived a lifetime a century ago that still resonates today. And we're going to continue reading this tomorrow, maybe an hour, hour and a half in the reading stream. Y'all be